20 million people across the developing world collect plastic waste to make a living, and they're operating in an invisible industry that handles 60% of all plastic recycling globally. While Americans sort recyclables into blue bins for municipal pickup, millions of workers in countries like Pakistan wade through garbage dumps and breathe toxic fumes in cramped workshops to transform our discarded bottles into new products. This hidden informal recycling sector represents one of the most crucial yet overlooked pieces of the global waste management puzzle. Pakistan alone generates 3.3 million tons of plastic waste annually, which equals the height of two K2 mountains. The country has no formal recycling facilities. Instead, an entire shadow economy has emerged, built on the backs of waste pickers, small workshop owners, and middlemen who process this plastic through a complex network of backyard operations. The scale of this industry is staggering. From the slums of Karachi to the streets of Delhi, from the favelas of Sao Paulo to the townships of Lagos, informal recycling workers comprise about 1% of the urban workforce in developing countries. These aren't just statistics, these are real people like 10-year-old Mehran, who wades through garbage in Islamabad's F10 sector, sorting through noxious waste to pick out plastic bottles. There's also Naik Mohammad, a junk shop owner in Mehran, surrounded by heaps of plastic bottles and cardboard that various scavengers bring to his operation. The terminology alone reveals the complexity of this world. In Pakistan, you have korewalas, ferrywalas, street pickers, and dump site pickers, each representing different levels in the waste collection hierarchy. Ferrywalas purchase recyclable items directly from households and shops, while other scavengers recover materials from waste dumps. All eventually sell to junk shop dealers like Muhammad, who acts as a middleman between collectors and the small industrial units that actually process the plastic. Understanding how plastic recycling actually works in these small workshops requires following the material through 5 distinct stages, each more labor-intensive and potentially dangerous than what you'd find in a modern recycling facility. Stage 1 is collection, and it's entirely labor-intensive, requiring little capital investment but significant human effort. Picture workers with hand carts and donkey-pulled carts moving through neighborhoods, or people climbing through massive garbage dumps with bare hands, searching for valuable plastic among rotting organic waste. The hierarchy here is precise. Muhammad pays 30 rupees per kilogram for plastic and paper, just 5 rupees for glass, but 60 rupees for metal. This pricing structure drives the entire collection system. Stage 2 involves sorting, arguably the most skilled part of the process. Despite requiring no formal training, workers must identify different plastic types based on resin identification codes, separating PET bottles from HDPE containers from polystyrene packaging. They also sort by color, because transparent, colored, and opaque plastics must be processed separately to maintain quality in the final product. This happens in small warehouses or even outdoor spaces, with workers sitting cross-legged among mountains of plastic, making split-second decisions about material types that will determine the value of the final product. The washing stage comes next, and this is where environmental problems start multiplying. Plastic waste needs to be cleaned of dirt, grease, food residue, and other contaminants before processing. In small Pakistani workshops, this typically means soaking plastic in large vats of water, washing with basic detergents, then air drying the material. But here's the critical issue. There's no standardization, no water treatment, no reuse systems. The contaminated wash water typically gets dumped into the nearest sewage system, spreading pollution throughout local water supplies. Stage 4 is shredding, where plastic gets broken into small pieces in preparation for melting. In formal recycling facilities, this happens in enclosed systems with air filtration and noise control. In small workshops across Pakistan, workers operate basic shredders in poorly ventilated rooms, exposed to plastic particles that become airborne during the process. The noise levels regularly exceed permissible limits, and workers have no protective equipment against the microplastics they're inevitably inhaling. The final stage, melting and extrusion, is where the real health dangers emerge. Shredded plastic gets heated to melting temperatures that vary by plastic type, then forced through extruders to create pellets for new manufacturing. In small workshops, this process releases a cocktail of toxic chemicals. Heavy metals, phthalates, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and volatile organic compounds are detected at levels that pose serious occupational health hazards. Workers operate these systems without proper ventilation, often in rooms with no windows, breathing fumes that cause immediate symptoms like headaches and nausea, plus long-term health problems, including respiratory disease and potential cancer risks. A study in Mumbai revealed that 60% of plastic recycling workers experience frequent headaches, 40% report nausea, and 30% suffer skin irritation. In Kolkata, blood samples from recycling facility workers showed elevated levels of lead in 75% of cases and cadmium in 65%. In Delhi, 90% of workers in the informal plastic recycling sector suffer from respiratory issues due to constant exposure to toxic fumes and particulate matter. The human cost extends beyond adult workers. Thousands of children work in this industry, including in the most dangerous aspects of e-waste processing. 10-year-old Mehran represents countless children engaged in garbage picking across Pakistan, working jobs that damage both their physical health and psychological well-being. According to the International Labour Organization, 79 million children globally are engaged in hazardous work, with a significant portion in waste-related activities. In Bangladesh, about 68% of child waste workers face developmental or mental health problems. Women make up around 60% of India's informal waste worker population, often migrants from rural areas or members of socioeconomically disadvantaged groups. They typically handle the sorting and cleaning stages, spending long hours hunched over plastic waste for minimal pay, exposed to the same health hazards as their male counterparts, but often with even less access to any form of healthcare or worker protection. The economics driving the system create a cruel paradox. Mohammed's junk shop in Islamabad generates about 271 million rupees annually, roughly $4.5 million, from recycling just in Lahore alone. Yet individual workers see almost none of this value. The pricing structure keeps waste pickers impoverished while middlemen and workshop owners capture most profits. A waste picker might collect 25 kilograms of recyclable material daily, earning just enough for basic survival while exposing themselves to serious health risks. What makes this situation even more complex is that these informal systems are often more effective at actually recycling plastic than formal alternatives. Countries like Nigeria mismanage 87.5% of their waste, India 68.6%, and Indonesia 43.8%. Pakistan manages to recycle 33% of its plastic waste entirely through this informal sector. Without these workers, that 2.6 million tons of plastic waste Pakistan generates annually would simply accumulate in landfills or be dumped directly into the environment. But there's a critical distinction between recycling and downcycling. Most plastic processing in these small workshops produces lower quality material that can only be used for less demanding applications. True recycling, turning a plastic bottle back into another plastic bottle, requires sophisticated processing that maintains material properties. Small workshops typically produce plastic that can only be made into lower grade products like park benches or traffic barriers. Each cycle further degrades the material until it becomes completely unusable. The technological limitations are significant. While a company like Shazil Pakistan Private Limited, which started recycling post-consumer PET bottles in 1998, now produces 5,000 metric tons monthly of high-quality recycled plastic for export to Europe, most small workshops lack the capital investment for proper equipment. They're using basic machinery, often improvised or jury-rigged, operating without quality control systems or environmental safeguards. Recent policy developments have tried to address these challenges, but with mixed results. Pakistan banned single-use plastic bags in Islamabad in 2019, and Punjab prohibited thin plastic bags in 2024. However, enforcement remains inconsistent, and these bans often just shift the burden onto informal recyclers who must handle different types of waste streams. The global context makes this situation even more complicated. In March 2022, 175 countries agreed to begin negotiating a UN treaty to tackle plastic pollution. But after multiple rounds of talks in Uruguay, Paris, Nairobi, Ottawa, and finally Busan and Geneva, negotiations collapsed in August 2025 without an agreement. The talks were divided between about 100 nations supporting production limits and bans on dangerous products versus major oil-producing countries including Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the United States advocating against measures to reduce plastic production. Industry lobbyists played a significant role in these negotiations. At the final Geneva talks in August 2025, 234 fossil fuel and chemical industry lobbyists registered to participate, more than many country delegations. Their message was clear: focus on waste management and recycling rather than reducing plastic production. This position essentially advocates for maintaining the current system where developing countries bear the burden of processing the world's plastic waste in dangerous, unregulated workshops. The economic incentives remain fundamentally skewed. As Nairobi-based entrepreneur Nzambi Mati explains, it's cheaper to make a plastic product out of virgin plastic than it is from recycling. Also, the product you get from virgin plastic is of way higher quality. This basic economic reality means that informal recycling only survives because workers accept wages below subsistence level and bear all the health and environmental costs themselves. Some success stories do exist. Colombia has begun formalizing informal waste pickers through national legislation, integrating them into official recycling systems while providing better working conditions and social benefits. In Bolivia, about 10,000 waste pickers now work with government-supported recycling hubs that link them to formal supply chains, with each worker recovering up to 25 kilograms of recyclable waste daily under safer conditions. Malaysia aims for a 76% recycling rate for plastics by 2030, partially through supporting informal sector integration. Companies like WeCyclers in Nigeria have created technology platforms that connect informal waste pickers directly to recycling markets, helping workers like Iya Daniel earn $194 in 3 months, enough to pay rent and school fees while building business capital. But these examples remain exceptions rather than the rule. Across Pakistan and most of the developing world, plastic recycling continues to depend on millions of workers operating in conditions that would be illegal in any developed country. They handle toxic materials without protective equipment, work in unventilated spaces filled with dangerous fumes, and earn wages that keep them trapped in poverty, all while performing an essential service that keeps plastic out of landfills and oceans. The fundamental question becomes whether this system represents a necessary evil or a preventable tragedy. Without these informal recyclers, plastic pollution in developing countries would be dramatically worse. Pakistan's 86% mismanaged waste rate would likely approach 100% without informal sector intervention. These workers are literally preventing environmental catastrophe through their labor. Yet the human cost is undeniable. When 90% of workers suffer respiratory problems, when children develop mental health issues from toxic exposure, when blood samples show dangerous heavy metal levels, these aren't acceptable trade-offs for plastic recycling. The current system essentially exports the health and environmental costs of plastic production from wealthy countries to poor workers in the global south. The path forward requires acknowledging that informal plastic recycling workers are essential partners in addressing global plastic pollution and not obstacles to be overcome. As Elisa Tanda from UNEP notes, the millions of waste pickers are a strong ally in the quest for solutions as the world seeks to end plastic pollution. But that partnership must include protecting worker health, ensuring fair wages, providing proper equipment and training, and integrating informal systems into broader waste management strategies. Until global plastic production incentives change, until it becomes more profitable to use recycled plastic than virgin material, developing countries will continue bearing the burden of processing the world's plastic waste. The small workshops of Pakistan will continue operating, workers will continue breathing toxic fumes, and children like Mehran will continue sorting through garbage to extract value from materials that wealthier countries have discarded. This hidden, informal recycling industry reveals the true cost of our plastic economy, Millions of people risking their health and lives to clean up after consumption patterns they didn't create, in countries that didn't benefit from the economic growth that plastic production enabled. Their work keeps plastic out of oceans and prevents environmental disaster, but at a human price that remains largely invisible to the consumers whose waste they're processing. Understanding their reality is essential to creating a truly sustainable approach to plastic waste, one that doesn't depend on exploiting the world's most vulnerable workers to solve problems created by its wealthiest economies. Make sure you subscribe